What's the quality of your grain in your grain storage right now? Do you know? We're going to talk about maintaining grain quality so you can get the most for your harvest. That's what we're covering in this edition of XtremeAg's Cutting the Curve.
Welcome to XtremeAg's Cutting the Curve podcast, where real farmers share real insights and real results to help you improve your farming operation. This episode is brought to you by Simon Innovation. Protect your crops and maximize yields with a full lineup of innovative precision tools engineered to enhance the efficiency and accuracy of your sprayer. Visit simoninnovations.com and start getting more ROI out of your sprayer. And now, here's your host, Damian Mason.
Hey there, welcome to another fantastic episode of XtremeAg's Cutting the Curve. I got Johnny Verell from Jackson, Tennessee. He's an XtremeAg guy. He's joined by Superior Grains, Rodie, Jelleberg, and Dave Wehlander. We're talking about maintaining the grain quality. You work really hard. You tune into all the stuff we're doing at XtremeAg. You listen to guys like Johnny talk about getting 3 more bushels of soybeans, how to maximize your harvest, agronomics. You do all of that work to get all the bushels you can. Then you store them in your grain facility. And I don't care if it's a brand new bin or if it's 40 years old and your grandfather built it. The point is, you need to be monitoring it. You need to be doing certain things to make sure that grain quality is there all year. Humidity, temperature, foreign matter, all that kind of stuff. We're talking about grain quality and maintaining it. So I'm going to lead off with Johnny Verell. I don't know how big of a deal this is. I came up with this topic, so I wanted to hear about it. We're going to cover it in a webinar also about grain quality, about grain maintenance, and all that stuff. You're going to be one of the guests on the webinar. So is this a big deal? It seems to me that I think grain sometimes is losing quality in the bins and people don't even realize it.
Yeah, I mean, once you break that crop, you don't want to lose the money you got invested in it. And, simple things you do throughout the year, once that grain's in them bins, can really help maintain that, that superior quality, so to say, or that high-end yield test weight that we've obtained throughout the year. A lot of times people put grain in the bin and kind of forget about it to a certain extent until they smell something or start seeing something going on. And by then it's too late. You got a lot of issues. If you start seeing water come out of the bins or something like that, you got some major issues on your way. So.
All right, so you could be dealing with a leak, which would be precipitation, moisture getting in, which is obviously going to degrade the quality of the grain, rot it. There could be humidity in there, which seems to me would degrade quality of it. Test weight. Can you lose test weight, Dave and Rodie? Somebody take that one. Can I put 62-pound test weight corn in the grain bin and all of a sudden I'm pulling out 56 or 58-pound? Is that possible? I don't know. I mean, you guys are the experts.
I think if you over dry it, it's possible that a lot of guys, the theory was always, when it gets to be a certain time of the year, especially up here where it's, they talk about freezing it down. If you just turn your fans on and let them run, technically, if you have a drying condition, you could, dry it down till it's way, way too dry. You'd lose test weight that way.
I do remember in northern Indiana that on those high pressure January days where it was like 18 degrees outside and sunny, you'd hear grain fans running on every grain bin in the countryside. What was the purpose of that?
Basically to freeze it, what they call freezing it down and take the moisture down to, a lot of guys will do natural air drying, which you put it in the bin at 16% for corn and you want to bring it down to 15 or 14 and a half.
Okay.
So guys would basically try to freeze it down so that they could get that last point and a half out of it.
Is that still something that is being done? Not as much.
They also freeze it down when it's wet so it doesn't spoil.
Yeah, right.
If you were to fill your bin with 20% corn, going into the winter and you didn't run your fans, you get a hot spot. You would get a hot spot.
Wouldn't that happen if I harvest in the 1st of November? Wouldn't that happen before January? Wouldn't I have already had a problem, or can it hang around that long without developing a problem?
I've seen some years monitoring, certain temperature cables and moisture cable systems. I've seen corn heat up to 50 degrees in the center of a bin in the middle of December when it's been below zero for weeks. So that the reason guys want to do that, they want to freeze it down, is just to to freeze it, to keep it cold
Sure.
so that it won't spoil.
But back to talk about maintaining grain quality. You told me that I might put grain in at 20%, like at harvest time when you're in North Dakota, which could be like, say, early November. You're saying I can let that sit in there at 20% for a month and a half, 2 months, and not have a problem?
Well, you're going to want to run your fans right away. You're going to want to try to capture. If you guys go in at 20%, that if they didn't have a dryer, they just had natural air, you're going to want to get those fans going as soon as you get that floor covered with grain, and try to capture any good drying weather that you can. Up here, it can turn, I don't know, any listeners spend much time in North Dakota, but if you don't like the weather, just wait 5 minutes because it changes. So winter can come, within a day, and then all of a sudden you're sitting there and you have wet corn in your bin yet and no good drying weather. And if it doesn't get frozen down, that's when guys will get hot spots, in anywhere through the winter, December, January, February. A lot of guys have dealt with stuff like that.
Johnny was getting ready to say something. By the way, you don't get down to negative 20, like 30, 40, like they do up there. And also, you do harvest wet corn, but it's not an option for you to let it hang around in West Central Tennessee. You can't put 25% corn in the bin and then just use natural drying. It has to go through your dryer, right?
Yeah, so just like you said, a lot of times we're harvesting corn, it's coming out of the field at 100, 110 degrees, just with the ambient temperature out of the field. When you put that in a grain bin, it doesn't take long to start having issues. The flip side is if we run the corn through a dryer and put it in the bin, say it's 16%, 15%, whatever we select, our temperature inversions are so big throughout the fall and throughout the winter. It could be 70 degrees here, on Christmas Day, and on New Year's Day, it could be 20 degrees. And so we have to really watch our temperatures because it's just like a glass of tea or a glass of water. Our bins will start sweating if we don't constantly regulate the inside of that corn temperature or grain temperature inside that bin, because, if you got corn in the bin, it's at 70 degrees and it drops off cold overnight, it'll sweat, and vice versa. You could have that corn, we could run them fans down there when it's in the 30s at night, and then it warm right back up, and that grain will just literally start sweating inside that bin. So we have to really watch what we're doing because of the big swings in temperature throughout the year. But, especially this time of year, we can have some big, 50-degree swings, and from, one day to a few days later, it could be 50 at night. So.
All right. So I want everybody to take this one on. So when I asked about grain quality, okay, we got the easy one is obviously if you've got leaks and you're getting water in it, but then you guys went straight to temperature. It seems to me that temperature and then humidity, which corresponds to temperature, is the biggest thing. Rodie's nodding his head and Johnny's nodding his head. So Johnny, you already brought that topic up. Temperature. Is that the key? Aside from if you've got augers that are grinding up your grain and, making it so that it gets docked because it's not, in good shape. Is it temperature and humidity the thing?
Yeah, you just got to be very careful what you're blowing in there on that grain because we have such high humidity nights, dew points are real high and stuff like that, we can actually blow moisture into the grain and actually reverse the drying process. We can actually rehydrate. We actually are able to rehydrate soybeans and wheat just by adding the moisture back in by the humidity's there. And, that's one of the biggest things I say we all fight, here in the South for sure, is just really watching what we're doing to the grain because just because it's sunny outside might not be a good day for us to be drying, or something like that too. So,
well, how do you know? How do you know?
Well, we got controllers on our bins that are constantly monitoring systems that are on there, and we actually have little Chi-Town heaters put on our fans that actually are kicking off and on, not to heat the grain up, but to dry the air out. So we're trying to blow a consistent, 15% moisture onto that corn going into through that fan by just running that heater off and on. That heater's cycling to maintain a moisture level.
You're displacing humidity.
Yeah, and that's a big deal for us. We have Chi-Town heaters on everything. It's not to dry the grain, it's to dry the air itself.
Are you calling it Chi-Town heaters like Chicago?
Yeah, Chi-Town. That's what we call. I don't even know what they're really called, but that's what everybody down here calls them. So,
and
that's what they're called.
How do they work? How do they work, Dave?
It's been a minute with those. They may be a little more popular down there than.
Is it connect to your fan?
Yeah, it bolts to your fan.
Yeah, and it runs off propane or natural gas, and Ours is controlled by the monitoring system we have. That's what's actually turning the heater off and on. And they only come on when the fan's running. They got to be in sync. So
Well,
it's a real
that used to be before modern dryers. When there was a dryer in the upstairs of your bin, that's how you dried it.
Yeah, and a lot of people used to get a chart from the university that said when the temperature is this, the humidity is this, you need to run the heater. And basically, just with the technology we have nowadays, that everybody's able to put on bins to really help monitor. You're really taking the science and actually using it, and it automates things a lot better and takes all that guesswork out. Because he was saying he's had hot spots at 50 degrees. I've had hot spots at over 100 degrees in grain too, and it doesn't take long at all for that grain to start going back. That can really mess your test weight up. You can lose the quality of your test weight with it being in the bin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the biggie. So, all right, Rodie, you haven't been saying anything for a while. First off, did he just describe how, because he's younger, he just describe how, isn't that how you used to dry, period? The bin was the dryer was in the top, and it was a fan with a big propane heater on it. It just blew in there, and it went up and then came out through some vent apparatus. Am I right?
Well, that's the top dry systems, and they're still around in a certain areas. They're more popular in certain areas. I think obviously with advances in mechanical drying, they're kind of becoming less and less.
Well, I'm going back 40 plus years ago too. So yeah, I'm talking about the grain bin. I'm talking about the grain bin I helped build when I was in 5th grade. So maybe even more than 40 years ago. So anyway, go ahead.
The other thing too with, temperature and humidity, test weight is one thing that you're concerned about, but the other thing too is, contaminants, molds. You get a lot of vomitoxins and mito and cytotoxins that you get in the grain because it's a perfect petri dish for those molds and all that stuff to grow.
You can't keep that stuff's blowing around in the air. How do you keep that out?
Biggest thing is you don't give it an environment to thrive.
Okay, and
so
that's
if your grain is in
humidity.
Yep.
So really, in the old days, we didn't have the ability. Now you really need a monitoring system. Can you put a monitoring system in your grain bin? If my grain bin's 40 years old, can I put a monitoring system inside of it to let me know what the temperature and humidity is?
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
And you'd be silly not to, right? Everybody's nodding their head. You'd be silly if you didn't have that.
Yeah, definitely. Especially when corn gets up to $7 a bushel. that's when guys are really after them. So
okay,
I think Damian too. You take into that piece there. You're taking the guesswork out, so you're not being wasteful with your utilities either. So the fans are only running when they need to, not when you think they do, or you turn them on and you go home and you forget to turn them off for 3 or 4 days. It really takes that guesswork out. And what I love about it sends me a text when I have an issue and tells me which bin has a hot spot, and it already kicked the fans on to address it, but it's at least letting you know what's going on. So,
and you're part of the world where your bins are, the grain is, it's worse when the grain's hot and it's cold outside, or is it worse when the grain's cold and it's hot outside? Which one's worse?
We seem to have the biggest issues is when we have the grain at a cool temperature in the winter, and then if we don't run the fans to warm that grain back up, it sweats more it seems like for us. It's how we see it.
And the sweat stays inside, or the sweat comes on the outside? If it stays on the inside, then it degrades quality.
I've seen water running out of the bins that they're sweating so much.
Yeah.
You turn the fans on, it's like a steam, like a sauna.
Yeah.
And so you got to be real careful. Like Rodie said, you do that, you start inviting all kinds of toxins and stuff to grow. So
Rodie's just safe to say to Johnny, by the time you got steam blowing out and water flowing down, you have lost quality. Like you are now probably making the corn or the grain less valuable.
Yep. And and I don't know, if Johnny's got some of this stuff on his, we talk about a lot of times when we're looking at a new project or an old project, whatever it may be, you want to have whatever your air going in, you need to have the same amount of air exit or exhaust. A lot of guys will just put, match, okay, I've got, X amount of CFM, so I need X amount of roof vents. A lot of times, a lot of guys don't like to spend the extra money, but if you've got a lot of issues with sweating and pulling high moisture out of your bin, a power exhauster on a roof vent is probably a good idea, because then you're actually not just, I've seen it where you'll push that hot air, that moist air, and it hits the roof vent or hits the roof on the bottom side, and it basically will start to almost rain because there's so much moisture condensating on that roof and it just dropping right back down. But if you've got a power exhauster, you're actually sucking and pushing that moisture out while you're pushing it through the grain as well.
And then what happens after that, when it condensates on the roof and drops back down on the top, it spoils that grain on the top. And then when you go to unload the bin, it stays in chunks and it comes down, and that's how guys will plug their sumps on their power sweeps, because of those
Big chunks of moldy corn. And by the way, I haven't been inside of a grain bin for a while, but last time I was, there was moldy corn there. I can just close my eyes and the smell comes right back to me.
Yep.
Answer me this. You said before we hit record, FM. That was one of the notes you had about maintaining grain quality. So a key to maintaining grain quality in your storage facility. What's FM mean?
Foreign material.
And
that's going to be anything from cobs to chaff to anything that made it past the combine that's in there. Also broken product. You know, it's all in how you treat it. Whether right as soon as it comes out of the combine, goes into your systems. If you can treat it more gentle with, say, a conveyor versus an auger versus a screw auger, you know, the more gentle that you can be on it, the less stress you're putting on it. If you're using high temp drying, mechanical drying, if you're dropping it hot, you want to make sure that you are as gentle as possible, so you're not causing those stress cracks, you're not breaking off part of the kernel, and you have all that foreign material. When you dump it in the bin, first thing it's going to do is it's going to go right towards the center when you start emptying it. And back to what Dave was saying, whether it's if you've got crusted stuff, or even, you know, if you have enough FM in there, you can plug your sump just with, you know, all that garbage in there.
Yeah, and that starts way before the bin. That starts at the combine, and then obviously starts at the offloading facility and those kinds of things. Johnny, it seems like we mostly are talking about corn. We're talking about moisture. We're talking about putting in high moisture stuff. We're not really talking about soybeans. You don't put them in at 25% moisture. We're not talking about wheat. You grow soybeans, you grow wheat, you grow corn. You don't grow cotton anymore. So how come we're not talking about the other two grains? Are they not an issue? Is soy and wheat not an issue? Can we just do whatever we want with them? Is it only corn that's high maintenance?
No, I would say all of them are. Soybeans for sure. If you get a lot of pods and FM in those, they can really cause you some major issues when you're trying to unload those bins as far as big clumps coming down through. So the same thing goes away, but I think farmers really push the limits on corn more than they do beans and wheat, you know, so it's one of those deals. I really think farmers sometimes put wetter corn than they do anything else in there.
Dave, you agree with that soybean, the biggest issue is soy storage, that's a quality issue, is foreign matter versus temperature, humidity, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's when those pods get in the bin and they get wet, if the beans, you know, when you're removing moisture, if you do go in a little wet and you're removing moisture, you know, you really have to be careful there, because you can have a lot of problems then with, well, not only quality, but then also when unloading your bin as well.
Rodie, you're up there in North Dakota. Wheat. Is there anything about wheat that farm operators do that degrades grain quality that's a fix they should look at?
Well, and if we talk about the difference between corn and wheat, the biggest differentiator between the two is your product density. If you have a bin full of wheat versus a bin full of corn, or even in a drying situation with a dryer, you need more air to push through that mass of grain because it's got a higher product density. So it takes more air pressure and a higher CFM to push that air mass through that product. So, you know, if a lot of guys are sizing their stuff for corn and all of a sudden they do wheat, or if it's something that they didn't plan on for wheat, they might not have enough air. So it's gonna take longer. You're gonna have to account for that, have a longer drying cycle to push that air through that mass.
Johnny, do you have any struggles with your wheat? Is corn your number one maintenance issue? Beans your second, and wheat's easy?
Yeah, wheat seems easy, but we don't leave it in there very long term. A few weeks it's coming back out because we're having to make, June, July, we're going to get that crop out in July because we're going to start putting corn in August. So wheat's really not a big issue for us. It's most times we run it through the dryer, it stays in condition for no longer. We're leaving it in there. It's the big temperature inversions what's always gives us the big problems in the South with corn.
And you're not using a University of Tennessee chart anymore that says if it's 37 degrees or below, do this. If it's this much humidity, do that. You're not doing that. You're using actual in-bin monitors.
Yeah, we have them on every bin. It just really takes that makes your mind at ease, so to say, and takes that guesswork out.
But sometimes,
so
if your grain's getting, if a problem inside of there and the conditions outside, if it's wet and hot or whatever, humid, you can't fix it by blowing air in there. Do you have to fire up the heater again? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it where people had to unload bins to try to get it back in condition. You got to kind of move it around and break it up. And, you just want to avoid all that. It's a lot of extra work and a lot of time on that. So
yeah, a lot of work and money and manpower to just maintain versus you're not even making anything off it.
That's right.
Got it. All right, Rodie, you're the star of the show here at Superior. Get me out of here. Keys to maintaining grain quality in your bins. Give me the wrap.
Biggest thing is having a way to tell what your grain is doing. So having a system, temp cables, moisture cables, having a system that actually will automate your fans is key. Then having the airflow to keep that product in condition. Make sure you have enough airflow with your fans are sized correctly. And then if you can put the product in there with low FM, so you have less garbage in there, if you will, that's going to be your best shot at success.
You're the grain facilities person and the dryer person and the fans person. You're not the monitoring system inside the bins person, or am I wrong?
We're trying to incorporate some of the monitoring even in with the drying systems and stuff too. So it all goes hand in hand.
Sure, absolutely does. All right, if I want to learn more about this from your standpoint, where do I go?
SuperiorBins.com.
SuperiorBins.com. Dave Wehlander, Rodie Jelleberg, thanks for being here, guys. Talking about the keys to maintaining grain quality. You worked hard. You did everything right. You tuned into all the stuff from XtremeAg, all these hundreds of videos that guys like Johnny and I produce to help you maximize your fields and get this huge crop. You put it in your bins. Why let it go to waste, or why let it lose quality that's going to cost you money? That's what this episode was about. We hope it was something that you can use on your farm for immediate benefit to help your farming operation thrive. Go and look up the videos, that hundreds of videos just like this podcast on the XtremeAg.farm website. We want you to use them to your benefit. Till next time, thanks for being here, Johnny Verell with XtremeAg, Dave, Rodie, and me, Damian Mason. Till next time.
That's a wrap for this episode of Cutting the Curve. Make sure to check out XtremeAg.farm for more great content to help you squeeze more profit out of your farming operation. Cutting the Curve is brought to you by Simon Innovations. Don't let your sprayer's limitations hold you back. Visit SimonInnovations.com and upgrade your sprayer's capabilities now.